My name is Robert Agnew, and the first time I came to the East Shore was in 1980, riding our bicycles out from Calgary, 5-day camping trip. And we actually moved here and stayed here in, I guess it would be about 86. So that's that was the beginnings. Well, Ted and Janet Wallace were living in Calgary, and Lynn Hazelton and I were, living in the basement in their house, and then they moved. And I was waiting for to hear about a job in Calgary, and so we got on our bicycles and rode out to visit Ted and Janet, and pushed our bikes all the way up Grey Creek Hill up to where Ted and Janet were living in Alan and Frances Hughes' summer house, and that's how we got here. And I did get the job, and every school holiday we ended up coming out here. And I can remember one night in particular where it was a New Year's Eve, and we went down and we were playing volleyball at the school, and then after that we went up to Bruce and Janet Fleming's house for a party. And I can remember standing there and looking around at these people, and I thought, these are people that I would like to spend time with. I like to get to know these people. These are good people. And I mean, at first I was enamored by the place. I mean, riding the bike up the lake road, and it was just magical. I lived in the prairies. I didn't know there was a place like this. Nobody ever had said anything about, this place. So between the beauty of the place and the people that I met, it just something clicked. And it wasn't that long after that I met Peter Duryea. And I can remember sitting on Alan Hughes' deck with Peter, and they said, we're going to do this conference on alternatives to resource extraction. And we're wondering if you would come and do a workshop on community economic development. And so that's what we did. And at the end of that, there was, 25 people or so in the workshop, and we were just in the process of setting up a clothing business in Calgary. And they said, well, why would you do it there? Why don't you come out here? You're here all the time anyway. So that's what we did. We were in a housing co-op. We took a leave from our housing co-op place, and we moved out here, and there was actually, community investment to help get the Crawford Bay Clothing Company started. So I credit Peter with, kind of getting things started for making us seriously think about being here. And one thing led to another. And, Peter's been an important influence in my life. I think it's because Peter and I shared a connection with nature. We actually did a workshop called Connecting with Nature, and both of us were really attracted by the idea that we have, I think that we counted them up at one time, 100 senses that we have. And one of the strongest senses, apart from, sight and hearing and taste and smell and all that, one of the strongest senses is a sense of place. And I knew from my own experience that I had found a place that I felt at home. I felt a part of the flow of life here. And that's what Peter was all about. For me, that's what Peter was all about, was that connection. And the workshops that were done at the teepee camp called A Sense of Place were, kind of encapsulated that. And I know at one point, every member of my family had gone to that sense of place. And now, most of my family are living here or spend the summer here, so there was a connection there that I still value to this day. There's something about the lake. I call it the Kootenay Lake Valleys, because they're all associated with the Kootenay Lake. Peter had come here from Hollywood, and I know when he described it to me is that he just had to get away from there. It wasn't something that he wanted to continue, and he found this to be a place that he felt at home. And so whenever Peter and I were at the teepee camp, there would be long conversations about just deepening our connection to the place. And I remember one time my son and I were in our sailboat sailing up Crawford Bay, and then we went around the peninsula and hit this west wind that was just, we had to take down the jib, and we reefed the mainsail, and I was standing up at the tiller just trying to keep the boat balanced, and we were heading for the teepee camp. We were kind of blowing up on shore, and there was Peter and Leo Williams, Tanaha elder that spent time at the teepee camp, and we ended up just spending the evening and the night there, and the wind died down, and we lit a fire, and just started telling stories, and Leo's stories were just precious, and especially when he'd pick up the drum and sing, and he dedicated himself to that, not just to the as a place to go and camp, but a place to have children go. When I worked at the school, every now and then I was part of the trip to the teepee camp with I think grade 4 or 5 students. And we would hike in from I think it was called the top of the trail or something like that. And, the kids would all be hiking down to the teepee camp. And when we arrived, Peter was there. And Peter had a presentation that he made to students to connect them to the place and to appreciate the value of the natural setting. And just to hear Peter, express that depth of connection to a place is something that resonates with me now. I spend most of my time outside. I spent a lot of my time up the mountain, and there's even a place that I call the Peter Duryea Wilderness Experience Research Field Office. And it's the sort of place that I go to, and I take people there, and I almost hear Peter in the back of my mind as I'm talking to people about, the value of being in a place like that. Peter was like that in a lot of ways. I can remember he used to be the Santa Claus at Grey Creek Hall, and he had quite a shtick going there. And I know I was invited to do the same thing in the Crawford Bay Hall, so I called Peter and I said, "How do you do it? How do you manage this?" And so he said, "Well, you need to have a story." There was a whole crew of people that were, had their families here, homesteaders, starting businesses here, and even to having the Kootenay Lake Chamber of Commerce at that time supporting the new businesses that were here. And at that time, it wasn't just all Kootenay Springs and tourism and restaurants. It was like pretty basic, services and goods and services that were needed by people that were trying to, make a go of it here. And in those days, there was, I probably missed a lot of the early movement of the Back to the Landers in the 70s, but that's when Peter was there. Peter passed away in 2013, and I just wanted to read something that really, for me, in Peter's words, describes what how he saw things. So, often we lose sight of the fact that we are all in this together, humans, the earth creatures, and the myriad of entities that create a living space that supports all our lives on Earth. Much of what we do has impacts on our surroundings far beyond what we intend. We need to learn to use our hearts in living and planning our developments, taking all of Earth's life into consideration. For we are not separate, as we have been taught, but we are made from all that is around us. Peter and I did research together. We would talk to people, and we would write proposals for research. And as a filmmaker, Peter was always wanting to record the importance of what people were saying. And one of the major projects that Peter and I worked on was for the Tourism Action Society of the Kootenays, TASC. Peter was on the board, and together we put together a proposal for a series of co-design workshops that took place on all the 6 population centers around the lakes. So it included Creston and Nelson, but also Caslow and Balfour and the North End and the East Shore. Over a period of 2 years, we trained a number of artists in the co-design techniques and writers, and we put together a series of kitchen meetings where people would gather in their kitchen, and we had a series of questions about what was important to them, what did they value about being here, and what were they worried about that they would lose in the future, or what did they really want to maintain in the future. So the kitchen meetings brought together people into larger groups where we did a co-design workshop with the artists and the writers, and a group of half a dozen people at a time, taking a particular aspect of what they wanted to see in the future and drawing a perspective drawing and all the words that went with it. In the words, and the people that were in the workshop were in the pictures that they were drawing with the help of the artist. There was over 100 images that were developed all around the lake. And at the end of it, we brought together representatives from all the communities and all the images and all the words, and we did a 2-day workshop that Peter filmed. And Envisioning Your Future was the result of that. It's wonderful to go around to different communities now and see the built result of all of that, because it's there. So, well, one of the things I really liked about the community organizations is that we took turns, so that there would be, usually there'd be a chairperson, a recording secretary, and somebody to make the treats. And that would rotate, so that if you were making the treats this time, next time you would be the recording secretary. And if you were the recording secretary, next time you'd be the chairperson. And it gave volunteers the opportunity to run things differently. I know that Peter was often the chairperson, I was often the chairperson, but everybody had a chance to take a turn. And one of the things I know that we tried to do is that instead of having just, when the decision was being made to have, well, here's what we got to do, let's, decide to do it. Well, sometimes it was contentious. It was like, well, we should do this, no, we should do that. We always looked for a third option. And to have somebody who would speak for all 3 options. And quite often it was that third option that became the one that was, that people could get behind. And often it was not a compromise situation. It was like a step beyond what your other options were. It was like there was more creativity involved. There was more, some of the amazing things that I can remember when we were trying to deal with logging companies, and there was a lot of work done to express the concern that we had, for example, of the effect of clear cuts when you were on the lake. And quite often in the logging planning, it was like, well, how's it visible from the road? But as a community, our concern was not just from the road or the effect on water courses and housing and that sort of thing, but what happens from the lake? Of course, Peter was often giving tours on the lake. That was one of his little side businesses, is he would, get a bunch of people in the boat and go out and he would talk about the history of the place and the geology, and he was a wonderful tour guide. And a lot of, you could see the plans from the lake. Well, I don't know, somebody like Sonny Green, who was a geologist and, could do things with technology even back then, would, come up with pictures of what this particular clear cut would look like from the lake. It would be superimposed on the landscape. And so, when people say that, oh, no, we can't have that. I can remember we used to do educational tours of logging shows. And so we would have a bunch of people, loaded up in the 4x4s and up there. We didn't interfere with the operation, but we would just be asking questions and giving information about what's the effect of this and what are the techniques. And I can remember one time we went on to a logging show, and we had blank placards, and we were along the edge of the road, and the trucks and workers would be coming back and forth. And we'd say, so don't, we're just practicing. And so we'd be doing our practicing demonstration, but no, don't bother us. We're just practicing. It's okay. And there was just a sense of theater often in the way that we went about just educating people and getting involved. A good example of Peter's involvement in something like that is the school project from, it was a little video that we made called From Garbage to Gardens. And what we wanted to do was to get a grant or get CBC involved to make a 27.5-minute long video. We ended up making a 6-minute video kind of as a teaser. And Peter was the director, and my role was to organize things at the school, because that's where I was working, and I was the worm man of Crawford Bay. We had the worm farm and the composting operation and the solar, a little coal frame, I guess it was, a year-round coal frame. So we arranged to do some filming at the school, and it was such a wonderful experience. Peter just seemed to be able to bring out, the things that people really wanted to express, and he just knew how to set things up with the cameras and the microphone, and it was quite a professional operation. One of the big projects was getting a new school. So again, another process of having everybody together in the same room and to map out what we saw for our need for a new school. We knew that we only had a chance to do this every 50 years or so, and it was really obvious that to build a new school was also an opportunity to attach to that construction project various community facilities that could be included as part of that construction. And a lot of money was raised, and we added on to the school the early childhood center, the theater, commercial kitchen, the fitness facilities, meeting rooms, and it was just amazing to see how the community came together and was just bound and determined to make sure that this opportunity was not going to pass us by without getting some of the things that we needed as a community. And whether it's been designated a community school or not, it really is a community school. And to have organizations that are connected to things in the school, well, the fact of the matter is a lot of the teachers at the school back in the day were also involved in a lot of these organizations. And a lot of the businesses were family-based businesses, and they were involved in those organizations because everybody was wanting to solidify the capacity of this community to meet our needs. Boy, some of the successes, Starbelly Jam is a good example. To be able to have a family-oriented chance to party as a community and invite all the visitors, in the summer to come and listen to music and let the kids run around and, to do it in a park, which was, there were so many images in the co-design workshop envisioning your future that involved what to do with that shared facility. And some of the momentum behind that I saw carried out when it came time to think about the wetlands and the transfer of title to the RDCK for that community park. And I think a lot of us recognize that as a community park that is part of a whole network of regional parks. And it's not just for people that live here, although you certainly see a lot of people taking advantage of, let's go for a walk in the wetlands and, building the trails there and access. I can just see over the next little while that momentum is really going to produce something that just expands the capacity of our community to invite our family and friends and neighbors and visitors to take care of a very special part, not just for the community, but for the whole lake environment. And this is something that Peter would be all over. And this community has the capacity to fulfill dreams, because it's pretty obvious that the people that are coming here are following a dream. And to the extent that we share that we have a common understanding of the value of wilderness, if we have a common intention to protect that wilderness and develop a relationship to it that is nurturing, and we can just continue. And we may not have a lot of help from outside, but we have the capacity to do it. This is a homestead community, and people have to do a lot of different things just to be able to survive here. So when we have visitors coming here and seeing that, how in the world do you live here? It's like, well, hard work and working together and tolerating each other, because the fact of the matter is, as far as I'm concerned, we're all a bit odd. We have our idiosyncrasies are respected because we all have them. And that's a very valuable thing to have in this day and age, to be able to tolerate everything, except intolerance. To be able to say is that, well, that's the way you are, and let's go ahead anyway. And as long as we can communicate with each other and respect that we're here for a reason, we've chosen to be here, and that our choices of being here are based on shared values. It's always possible for us to extend ourselves a little bit more and open ourselves a bit more. And when we do, there's a pattern that's already been established in this community that we can invite people to be a part of. And it's going to be good for all of us. So at this time, it's really difficult to know what the future has to bring. This is a year since we first heard about the pandemic hitting our country. And so many people say that we need to come out of this in a way that is better than things were before. Well, my view is that things were pretty good before. I'm really glad that I'm living here now and that my homestead has been, set up so that I'm quite self-sufficient and happy to be here day in and day out without really being affected so much by something as large in scale as a pandemic. And so for us to be able to find the ways to take the steps that move us forward into a future that the sort of thing that Peter envisioned and inspired so many of us to, keep on going, that we have a legacy that Peter established that we can contribute to. And it's our relationship with each other, it's our relationship with the place that we live, and it's how we organize ourselves to share the values that are so important to us.
I appreciate each and every one of you for bringing yourself here. And I think that I appreciate what you take away from here too.